Lots of interesting things in there, obviously. Lots of great experience and expertise. Coming to you for questions as soon as you're sort of ready. Can we just pick up again, and including bringing in you guys' views on it as well, on this notion of how you collaborate, so that you build on the artistic innovation, and then ideally you end up with a technology that other people can innovate on top of. But to do that involves collaborations with creative, artistic, technological, maybe even some marketing people. How do you actually run teams like that in your experience? And Claire, do you want to kick off with sort of really practical things? You know, do they all meet every day? What, you know, you were talking about sprints.
The model that we use is that we produce those collaborations. So we create a space, a physical space and an intellectual space where the conversations can happen, and it kind of with an equal starting point. And language is really important. At the beginning of the collaboration, you have to work out if the words you're using mean the same thing to both of you, and often they don't. You have to work out what each of you want from a collaboration, and it doesn't have to be the same thing, but it's a really good idea to be clear at what you're looking for, and it's a really good idea to revisit those. And I think what I really have loved about working on both of these projects is the times when opportunity was spotted. So there was an idea, all of the people knew what they wanted to do. There was a certain amount of blue skies R&D where they were quite open to new things coming in, but in all cases opportunity was spotted. And I think the thing that Tim and Peter perhaps didn't make really clear is that we hooked Tim and Peter up, and Tim was at the beginning a kind of delivery agent, really, who was just going to build something. It then kind of became a collaboration where both parties were kind of feeding in and suggesting things. And then Tim spotted this opportunity, which he's now turned into a business. So this kind of the collaboration has multiple values and outputs to it, which aren't just about financial outputs. They're about the artistic outputs. They're about the ability for Proto-type to create different kinds of performances which bring in different kinds of audiences. But being open to the idea that you may want different things out of it and new things might come up takes time, and you have to make sure you meet. If it's a TSB thing, you also have to be monitoring. And you have to write long things about your work packages. And one thing I would say about that, at the beginning of doing that project, I thought it was the worst thing I'd ever done, and I was going mental over exploitation plans and work packages and Gantt charts and this totally alien way of working. And putting all of that work in at the beginning of the project enabled it to run so smoothly, and enabled us to roll it out without any massive problems. And so I was very wrong. I don't think I'll be doing Gantt charts for all my projects in future, but investment in building that collaboration.
Okay, brilliant. Questions from anybody out there? If not, I will carry on. Okay, so go, Jo. Yeah.
But again, because there's different people with different skin in the game, especially when a project runs over a long period of time, those scheduling points are absolutely vital. So the other thing that I always try to do is to break down clear milestones early on, and points where people have to come on, so that you can change. So you phase the project with critical functionality you know has to happen at a certain stage, with room to expand, because with different organisations, they get busy at different times, and especially arts organisations, as Claire said, if that's not the primary thing they're doing, then you need to make sure that they're available at a certain time for critical pieces that have to come together. So, I mean, all of that stuff.
There's other things. Intellectual property is a really important thing to talk about. You may decide that you want to keep it really open, and you may decide that you don't want to put in massive collaboration agreements, but doing that at the beginning it is a good idea, and just checking that you're both on the same page about where that intellectual property will be vested. And also some of the people that we work with are like Tim, who's not unlike a cultural organisation. He's running a small agile startup that has similar pressures to a lot of pressures we're doing. Sometimes it's Hewlett-Packard, and then you start to think about cash flow and payments and different, just the sheer size of an institution, and trying to make sure that those things are taken into account really early on is important.
Peter?
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things working as an artist with a technologist that somebody from the Pervasive Media Studio told us early on, Hazel, was that because we were finding it confusing figuring out how to translate our language to Tim's language. So we're coming at it from an artistic creative perspective, and Tim's coming at it from a technologically creative perspective. But our languages are slightly different, and so sometimes we would speak in shorthand that was not quite making sense. And also we thought we had to change our process suddenly to be more like a development process for a video game or something. And what Hazel said to us early on was, why are you changing your entire process? You're a theater maker, you make performance all the time. What you need to do is adapt your process or translate your process into a language that Tim would understand, and then Tim had to do the same thing to a degree, although I think he was a bit better at that than us. So it wasn't about reinventing the wheel in terms of how you make work. It was simply about kind of nuancing it and realizing, okay, well, when we make work, we meet and we have ideas and we immediately get up on our feet and do something. So then that's what we did with this project. We immediately got up on our feet and tried to make this thing work in a kind of paper, bare bones fashion, and then that informed how the project took shape. So I think that was really important.
I think
advice.
that's just knowing your value in a collaboration is really important. Peter Carlton from Warp Films came and did a talk for us a couple of weeks ago. He talked about when Steve McQueen made Hunger, and he went in and started to try and act like a filmmaker. And he was like, why are you acting like a filmmaker? We brought you in because you're an artist. Do what you're really good at. And I think it is understanding the value you bring from both sides so that you can both be clear about it.
How does that feel for you, Tim?
I just want to sort of emphasise just a sort of more nuts and bolts angle on the whole thing, really, which is the importance of prototypes, that you can talk to one another till you're blue in the face, and you might actually think you understand one another, but that could be entirely fictional. And the only way you're going to test that or make it fact is by building something together. And it's only when there's actually this thing that can be talked about as an objective entity to some extent, that you really understand what it is that you were both trying to do. Because in fact it doesn't do that thing that they wanted it to do, right? And now you've built it, they can see it doesn't do the thing that they wanted it to do. Before they could kind of half believe it would, and I kind of half believed it too. And so it's very important to physical prototypes, whether they're paper or actual technology, are incredibly important.
And what's the role of the user and testing in all of this? Because so far it all sounds rather artist-led to some degree. I know it's not, but that's the way it's coming across to my ears.
Yeah, I mean, in our case, we did a 3-day test before we even got the Theatre Sandbox with the concept of a project that was going to last over a long time, which helped us to inform the pitch that we gave. And we worked, I think we had about 15 participants, and that completely changed the direction of the project, because we were doing something which was very narrative because we thought that that's what it should be, and we immediately realized that was terrible. That's not how it worked. It didn't work in the format that we were using. So, and then we did a 3-day test in Bristol with some of the technology, and then we did a week-long version in Bristol as part of Theatre Sandbox before we then did the full 2-week thing in Mayfest. So all along the way, we were collecting information from the users about what happened for them, and the project was extremely responsive to their feedback without, collapsing its artistic integrity. So we didn't bow to every piece of information. But if it wasn't for, feedback about, for instance, the location where people live, we would never have realized that we needed to have a really kind of tight catchment area in terms of who could participate so that they could actually make it to all the locations at the right time, which seems obvious, but we didn't know that until somebody told us.
So that's a relationship with your users that testing is not a step, it's a process.
Oh God, yeah.
And so technology projects break, that's a fact. And if you're working with something like GPS, it's rubbish. Sometimes it will put Watershed here and sometimes it will put Watershed over there, depending on the weather. And so Joe was the person who taught us that you use the affordances of the technology. You use that as part of the artistic experience. You don't fight against it. But you're not going to be able to understand that without kind of collaborating with your audience on what those affordances are. Because also scaling something can break it. It might work really well with just you in your studio, but as soon as you get it out into the real world with multiple users, totally different. And your technology partner can really help you with that, because they might have user experience people who are really kind of well versed in understanding how people are going to interact with these technologies, or you might want to go to an academic partner and look for an ethnographer or a social scientist who can help you talk about how me as a human being is relating to that, how it's fitting in the context of my life, the environment it's in. But it's really worth investing in those parts of your project.
Tim, and then I'm coming to a question. Okay. Go on, Tim.
Yeah, just to say about Fortnite, that the fact that the people who were participating in it could tweet about it while it happened meant you actually had. You could argue it's not. They wouldn't have tweeted what they really thought, but it was anonymous. And because they're all tweeting from the same account, but that you actually had real-time feedback.
And we did
on
change
the Twitter channel.
We changed content based on some things that we realized were just functionally misleading.
So that kind of social media instrumentation of the experience is actually really valuable.
And sorry, one other thing is whenever you give somebody an object and send them out into the world, what they do with it, you never know what they're going to do. And that getting the information about what they did with these objects was really helpful in changing, for instance, how they looked. Because we discovered in an early test when they were kind of cheap with a little funny sticker on them, that people got really emotionally invested in them and they wanted them to be a kind of something that they could feel proud wearing. And so we turned them into something that was a little bit more aesthetically pleasing.
Great. Okay, we have a question just there, I think.
My name is David Slater. I'm a company called Intelliky Arts. I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about in what ways the participants' relationship with their city changed from the beginning to the end of the engagement?
Well, it's kind of hard to know the exact answer to that because there are a lot of them, but what we heard from some people was that what it changed was not so much the relationship to the city, but the relationship to the time they spent going through their daily life. So there were a number of kind of prompts where we were asking people to be creative, essentially, on their commute or on their way home or while they're at work in different ways. And a lot of people reported that it changed their behavior. So instead of taking the same way to work every day, they started taking a slightly different way. Or instead of having their headphones on their commute to work, they took their headphones off and listened to people and wrote what they were hearing. And a number of people have started blogs. A bunch of them have started a Facebook group now where they're giving each other creative prompts that are similar to the ones that we gave, but they're setting them up so that they can be creative in the city together. So I think it was probably a subtle shifting of people's relationship to creativity, maybe more than to Bristol specifically.
I know people that I didn't know, and that sounds maybe trivial, but if I just went to a performance at Bristol or Vic, I probably wouldn't recognise those people again. But I see a person every morning now who I have a little chat to, and you just see people around because it created this kind of club, I guess, of people who were playing. And I got my RFID thing stolen, and I'm really sad about it because I was still wearing it. Yeah, well, I got the jacket stolen.
Oh, gosh, yeah. Does that answer your question?
That's great, I think so. So we have somebody down here, please. Just mic's coming from behind you. There we go.
Hi, Helen Cole from Inbetween Time Productions again. It's a little bit of a provocation, really, which is just something I'm thinking at the moment. And we've got two really great examples of two successful research projects. But one of the things they have in common is Isheds' involvement as facilitators, producers, You know, like Clare said eloquently about the need to create space where these meetings happen. And also, it sounds like in the case of Peter and Nick, as brokers between that relationship. And as someone who's coming in, you know, completely new, thinking, I've got these great ideas, I know I can meet some good technologists and work together. But actually, one of the findings already I'm seeing for NESTA is you need organisations like Isheds to kind of facilitate these conversations. But, you know, in a way, I've come in with confidence thinking I could do that. But hearing these two examples, I'm actually not so confident, because I think we do need more Isheds, to be honest. And that's going to be difficult for Clare to handle in this room. So I don't know what my provocation exactly is, but...
I wouldn't argue that obviously we need more Isheds,
Yeah.
but I think there are things, so if I was going to say the practical things I could think people can do, it would be don't hang out at arts and cultural events, because that isn't where you'll find the people who are different to you, who you can collaborate with for these kinds of projects. So I would say go to, I'll use Bristol examples because we're here, but go to Bristol media events where the digital media organisations are and start chatting to them about your ideas. There's a thing called Kitten, which you're not supposed to call it Kitten, but it's the Creative Industries Technology Innovation Network. If you Google CITIN, it comes up. CIKTN, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's they put events on where lots of academics and tech companies come to. People are really crying out for good ideas, and you can make these collaborations. It is then really difficult if you haven't got somebody fighting for you in terms of intellectual property and making sure you get paid on time and all of those things. But there are lots of places out there. Verity also at the front is from iNet in the southwest, working with lots of digital media companies.
And I would say that's kind of partly the job of the digital media partner as well, to some degree, if they're worth their salt.
But you have to find the digital media partner,
absolutely.
I think is the point.
But,
yeah.
Absolutely, once you find them. But it's also about setting your expectations. We lost the mic.
One of the things that I've had some managed funds for, which we're looking at rolling out, but just want to make sure that it's attached to Arts Council's activities in the right way, is a thing called Technology Bank, which is basically a website for people interested in a mailing list. It's not a website. It's really cheap, easy to run mailing list, which hopefully you'll be able to post an idea to and go, I want to know about this, and either a technologist or will come back and go, you should look at Arduino or let's collaborate, and that just to try and link people up really quickly, and also to stop us all replicating R&D, because I think there's quite a lot of people going, actually I already know that doesn't work for that, or as we found out last week, Cubase is also really good for QLab is also really good for triggering RFID, and it's something that comes from the theatre world. So.
Okay. Did I see a hand? No, I didn't. Okay. It's like being an auctioneer suddenly standing up here.
Can I say something about that?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
I think as artists, I guess, whenever we engage in any process, there is a kind of research that happens. And in the case of collaborating with a digital person, I suppose that research is about finding the partner. And working with Isheds meant that we didn't have to do that bit of research in a way, or it happened really quickly. We did do it by meeting with Tim and other, we met with Calvium and other people to find out who was the right partner. But it happened really, really fast, and it was facilitated really well. You can do it on your own. It just, you need to, I think, allow more time. And you need to you need to have clear expectations set it with NESTA. NESTA needs to have clear expectations that it's going to take time for that relationship to formalize and to develop, because it isn't the responsibility of the digital partner, it's the responsibility of both partners. It's a equal thing, and it only happens if the relationship works well. The reason we worked well together is because we could speak the same language and we got along with each other, and that's key. If we didn't like each other, it would have been a failure. And that just takes time.
But I mean, the thing Hasan said is really important. Failures are okay in this space as long as you learn from them and preferably share them, because it's high stakes and these things often don't work. So we need to, as a sector, if we're going to go down this journey, kind of recalibrate what we think about as failure, and also get the confidence to talk openly about those things without worrying that it will affect our next G4A app.
I'm slightly concerned with developing a notion that there's digital people and arts people again, and I'm not sure that's right.
No.
There are a number of entities that are publicly funded and that aren't, which live in that space in between. So, for instance, there are a number of big digital and television orientated businesses in the southwest that have got very serious expertise in the overlap between those two spaces, where they know quite a lot, about both sides. So it's important we don't set up a false dichotomy. There's people who just code and people who just do art, and I'm probably fairly passionate about that because that's my life. That's 15, 20 years of my career has been in that that gap in between. It maybe that's the first partner you need. Not me, because I'm not doing these, but that kind of partner to help you do the brokerage. I mean, this came up to some degree in London as well. Sort of how do you find the right partner? It's all very well having a bunch of people saying I can make your app, but if you don't know how to choose whether they're any good at it, or whether your platform's better than somebody else's, it's very, very difficult.
Or just go to but I think go look up people whose projects you like,
Yeah.
and go speak to them. If you think they've made something beautiful, then there's a good chance that that you might get on.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Hasan's going to chip in, I think.
Chip in on that.
Hold for the mic, please.
Just going to briefly chip in on that. I mean, one of the reasons why we put so much effort into these digital days, sort of holding 5 over the summer, and for us this was very much, normally when you're sort of putting together a program like this or a new fund, there's an issue of communications and marketing, but that wasn't the right language for this. It almost feels for us that this is like these digital days are part of a sort of a campaign. So one of the things that we're trying to do is, I agree that there should be more Isheds, incidentally, but we're working with what we've got. So the issue is, trying to engage the Isheds, because there isn't just one Ished. Try and get those organisations throughout the England area, the region that we're working with this fund, to actually engage and champion this fund. And put simply, if you know who your my hope would be that those Isheds are known locally, and the first starting point should be speaking to them. If you're literally lost for an idea, you've got a great idea, but you just don't even know where to start. I mean, my hope is what would naturally happen, and that's frankly been my experience. I mean, in the last 6 years working around these issues, is that a lot of that activity sort of does happen, and my hope would be that there are actually people that one could speak to, even if one is actually really stuck. But to be honest, we'll find out, right? I mean, if this fund doesn't work for that reason, we will know that, and we'll know it rigorously, and we'll learn on that in terms of, and the Arts Council no doubt will reflect on that when it comes to taking forward its innovation.
Okay, can I take that? Yeah.
Just to quickly thank you for that, but the other point that I think is also just we've become a little bit focused on brokering and finding partners, but actually the other thing that I was kind of trying to emphasise was the need for this in-between space, which is what you said, and how that's created. And my concern, of course, with this quick turnaround with the R&D is going to be organisations that are already well on the way, which it should be probably, because they're going to be able to be testing their propositions very well, and the next phase will be where potentially more space will be being created, I guess. But for me, it's very clear that there needs to be, as with any collaboration, space made for the handling of those questions that each partner brings, and how that then
I think part of the structural logic of the fund, to answer this question on behalf of NESTA almost, is that idea of collaborating between arts organisations as well. So some who are further down the road and some who are not so far down the road collaborating together. That's a criterion of assessment.
It is. We've tried to sort of lightly incentivise, as it were, organisations to do that, because what we say is other things being equal, we will put more weight on those sorts of collaborative projects. So it was a very strong theme, you can imagine, that came up in the scoping of this exercise, and we had to make a decision on whether we build a development programme, because building those spaces is not straightforward,
different job.
Clare will attest.
Okay, we've got time for one more if anybody's got a burning issue or thought.
Can I talk
Otherwise, I'll give you a summary. Yeah.
Something that hasn't come up is documenting these projects, and I think it's really important to think about not just how you evaluate their success, but how you document them. We're often making projects which disappear, which are kind of small moments in time, and we've worked and learned a lot about documenting them so that you have something on your website to talk about, so that you can think about what the next stage of them and use them as a pitch or selling tool. But also, £6,000 might buy you an iPhone app, but these days it would probably be wasted money, because actually small investments and things like that, without thinking about how you feed them over time, is the most important thing. We need to build communities around the content, and we need to keep it enlivened. We need to keep offering new parts to our app or new bits to experience to get people to keep downloading it. So I think try and think of it in terms of little steps towards achieving something brilliant, and that might be helpful.